Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to go beyond the headlines about the Strait of Hormuz and really break down the strategic chess match that's happening just below the surface.
So, what are we seeing in the news? It's all about military posturing, right? A captured Iranian cargo vessel? And yet, on the surface, it just looks like a pretty straightforward standoff at sea.
But that's where my job as a risk analyst comes in. We have to look past those immediate events to understand the deeper forces at play. You know, the strategic calculations that never quite make the front page.
So, okay, let's do that. Let's peel back those layers. We'll start with the flashpoint, what kicked all this off. Then we'll dive into why diplomacy seems to be completely stalled. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it, the strategic long game that's really driving this whole crisis.
Okay, so this whole recent escalation, it really started with a direct confrontation out on the water. And that one move just threw all these delicate diplomatic efforts into total chaos.
Now, look at the contrast here, because this is really interesting. You've got the U.S. seizing a vessel. Iran's reaction, they tighten control over the shipping lanes, they warn of retaliation, but, and this is the key part, then comes this signal. Officials are also saying they've held back from attacking to avoid civilian casualties. See, that's not just a threat, it's a carefully calibrated message. It's showing strength and restraint at the same time, which really hints that there's a much more complex strategy at play here.
So, it's really no surprise that all this action on the water has brought talks on land to a grinding halt. And that's happening even with this flurry of high-level phone calls that are supposed to be de-escalating things.
Yeah, the official diplomatic track, the one that's supposed to stop this from spiraling out of control, it's basically hit a brick wall. I mean, in just the last 24 hours, you've had multiple calls between Iranian and Pakistani officials, and nothing. They've gone nowhere. And Iran is being very specific about why they're refusing to join talks in Islamabad.
So that's their official public position. But here's the question we have to ask as analysts. Is that the whole story, or is that public justification just one piece of a much, much larger strategic plan?
And this is where we really get to the core of it. From my perspective, Iran's hesitation, this reluctance to just rush to the negotiating table, it's not emotional. It is 101% transactional.
So the crucial thing to understand is that optics are everything here. As the geopolitical risk specialist Marco Vicenzo points out, Iran wants to negotiate, but, and it's a big but, they don't want to be seen as negotiating from a position of weakness. This is a slow, methodical game they're playing to manage perceptions, both at home and for everyone watching around the world.
You could call it strategic reluctance. It's not a simple no. It's a calculated posture. By buying time, by showing this hesitation, Iran is trying to completely reframe the entire negotiation from the ground up. And this right here, this shows you their goal perfectly. They don't want to have a narrow conversation about one ship or even just the nuclear issue. No, they want to start there, but then they want to expand the conversation to include lifting those crippling economic sanctions and ultimately to demand long-term security guarantees. What they're trying to do is turn this one crisis into a huge, comprehensive settlement.
Now, this complex strategy, this deliberate slowdown, it actually creates an opening for other global powers. Powers who have their own very significant and frankly vital interests in keeping the region stable.
And right away you can see two totally different playbooks. On one side, you've got the U.S. approach, direct military pressure, seizing vessels. And on the other side, you have China, much more reserved, working behind the scenes, making these public calls for calm.
So why is China so invested in this? Well, for Beijing, this isn't some abstract diplomatic game. This is about protecting critical economic lifelines. China is heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy that flows right through this strait. It needs these shipping lanes to be open for its role as the world's global assembly line. You see, a sustained blockage here doesn't just hurt the local players. It's a direct threat to China's economic stability. It would send immediate shockwaves through global oil prices. So, listen, if this Pakistan-led process fails, you can absolutely expect China's role to become much, much more prominent.
And it's not just China either. You've got Russia and Pakistan in constant high-level communication. And their goal, it's exactly the same. Prevent a return to major hostilities. Because they know that would just send shockwaves through global commerce and cause energy prices to spike everywhere. It's really a multipolar effort, with everyone trying to pull the main players back from the brink.
Okay, to really get why a quick fix here is just so unlikely, we've got to zoom out a bit. This standoff didn't just pop up overnight. This is not a new problem.
This conflict has really deep roots. You have to look back at things like the JCPOA. You probably know it as the Obama-era Iran nuclear deal. That whole experience set a precedent for just how incredibly complex these negotiations can get. And you better believe that history is directly informing how Iran is playing its hand right now. Then, in more recent years, tensions just shot up dramatically after big shifts in international policy and sanctions. All of which brings us to today, where we have this fragile ceasefire that's being threatened by these direct confrontations at sea. This is really just the latest chapter in a very, very long story.
And this quote, it just nails the core takeaway for any kind of risk analysis here. Like Marco Vinzanino says, you're not going to solve something that's taken years, even decades, to build up in just a few days or weeks. It's just not possible. This is going to require immense strategic patience from everybody involved, and, well, patience is usually the first thing to run out in a crisis.
So, that leaves us with the big, critical question. When you have a standoff that's defined by decades of deep-seated distrust, and it's layered with all these complex, competing strategic goals, is patience really going to be enough? Honestly, that remains to be seen. And in the meantime, the world's economy is kind of holding its breath, just watching and waiting for the next move in the Strait of Hormuz.